Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Massgasm Radcast. I'm here with my sister, Doctress Newtopia. How are you, Doctress?
Oh, very well. Very hot. It's like 111 here in Tucson, Arizona. And tomorrow they're talking about 116. In Phoenix, it is so hot that the asphalt is starting to melt. And I read one article that said that, that's not so good for the airplanes.
Ooh, wow.
So it's just hot, you have to be in some kind of shelter. And after a certain point, excuse me, like in Death Valley, I was there at one point for a anti-nuclear rally where they used to have them at the test site near Death Valley. And this Native American man, Corbin Harney, who was the leader of this tribe who held these anti-nuclear demonstrations, he said that once Death Valley gets to be 130 degrees, that air condition no longer works. Nothing you can do. It's just too hot. You have to evacuate.
Wow. Boy. Abrupt climate change is upon us. And that provides the context, the most striking and most terrifying and deadly part of the context in which we're having this whole conversation. And today, as last session, we're going to just be exploring a lot of topics related to that, including but not limited to the transformation of culture, spiritual transformation of humanity, among many other transformations, economic, political, social, agricultural, industrial, our entire set of living arrangements and how we relate with each other is beckoning for radical transformation, and I believe all of the above is absolutely necessary for our survival in the face of abrupt climate change, among many other problems. So, and contemplating all of this, I just want to start off with a story about what I did this last Saturday afternoon in Seattle, and then just throw it open from there. How does that sound, Doctress?
Yeah, I want to hear this story.
Okay, but anything else to add as way of introduction?
Let's hear this story.
All right. So it's a pleasant Saturday afternoon. Well, pleasant. It started kind of sprinkling a bit, but it didn't really rain too hard or anything. And it was the day of the Solstice Parade here in Seattle, Saturday, June 17th. And so kind of towards the tail end of the parade, I wandered down to Fremont just to kind of experience being among people in this whole festive atmosphere and all that, and maybe get something to eat, whatever. And so I went down, and as I'm down there, just seeing, everyone kind of focusing on partying and having a good time and socializing and whatnot, it just really hit me over the head that we're staring down the barrel of an ice-free Arctic for the first time in 3 million years. And that is such a deadly tipping point that really it demands all of our attention right now. And here at the annual Solstice Parade, celebrating solstice, the summer solstice, in this progressive city of Seattle, aside from, a couple few environmental floats and whatnot, after the parade, when everyone's congregated together, what a perfect opportunity for us to be grappling with this existential crisis. And yet everyone's going around pretending that the crisis is not happening, or just totally unaware that there is a crisis. And it bothered me so much that everyone's just kind of walking along, just kind of like, texting their friends, where are we going to meet? Where are we going to hook up? Where are we going to get drunk? Whatever. And it just, it just struck me that, wow, this is in some way the heart of the problem. And then I looked at myself, and what am I doing? Well, I'm walking along with my phone and, looking to, have fun and whatever. And I said, okay, so I am the problem. So if I am the problem, what can I do about it? And so I went to this giant statue of Lenin that had been in the Soviet Union for decades, back in the day, and somehow, the city of Seattle acquired it and shipped it over. Anyway, it's this giant statue of Lenin. And on Lenin's hand, he's got one hand that's like pointing in the air and he's like proclaiming something, and the other hand that's kind of hanging by his side. Someone had put, red paint looking like blood on his hand. And anyway, so there I'm standing at the statue of Lenin, and there's, kind of groups of people here and there at different kind of outdoor restaurant, cafe kind of places, and other people walking around in groups. And it's at this major intersection. So every minute and a half or so, a group of people crosses the intersection as a group of 15 or so people, right? And so as these groups would cross the street, I would yell out, "Wake up, Seattle! We are staring down the barrel of an ice-free Arctic for the first time in 3 million years." Oh. Right? This is devastating to our planet, and is going to be, and is the most important tipping point. And how many of you know that? And every once in a while, someone would raise their hand that they knew, that we're going to have an ice-free Arctic. I said, do you know the implications of that? And I would give people this analogy, metaphor of, you're holding, you've got a martini that has a couple of ice cubes in it. And at first it's, the liquid inside the glass is 0 degrees centigrade because of the presence of the ice cubes that are slowly melting. As long as there's any ice at all in the glass, the liquid is at 0 degrees centigrade. The moment that last sliver of ice melts, it jumps from 0 degrees centigrade, and it just starts, and there's no turning back, and it just gets warmer and warmer because you're holding it in your warm hand. The North Pole, the polar ice, is the ice in the martini that is planet Earth. It is our cooling, it is the cooling system of the northern hemisphere of planet Earth. And it's that interaction between that cooling system and the heat engine that is the tropics, where my grandmother grew up in the Philippines, Josefina Pellicer. It's those two working together that create the jet stream. And that's what gives us our stable, predictable climate, in which we've got the farmer's almanac, and when to plant, and when to reap. And so, but all that is about to be turned on its head, which means no more stable climate, which means the end of the large-scale agriculture that we've had for, under relatively stable patterns for centuries, for millennia, relatively, compared to what's coming. What's coming is going to be utter chaos. And so, just bellowing out and then engaging people in much more quiet but still very public conversation about all of this and its implications, and what are we going to do about it, and why are we doing nothing about it? Why is no one talking about it? Why is the media not talking about it, the big media, et cetera, et cetera? So we had we delved into different areas. We delved into the area of cultural transformation, and at that point I was talking with these 3 students, presumably, and 3 young men, and who completely agreed with me on climate change and the urgency for it, et cetera. And so as we were grappling with, well, what do we do about it? I said, well, one thing that we do about it is what we are doing about it right now, which is transforming human culture. Right now, we are transforming human culture because we are interrupting the standard, all of us on our phones, isolated in our bubbles, seeking pleasure, as the crack babies that we are, to paraphrase Guy McPherson. And, we're interrupting that. We're saying we are interrupting this delusion to bring you a dose of reality right here in public, right? And at one point when one of them asked me, well, how are you going to make this cultural transformation? How are you making it happen? And I said, well, here, let me show you by doing. And then I said, right then a big group of people was walking across the street, wake up, Seattle. We are on track for an ice-free Arctic, blah, blah, blah. And so, it was like that. It's one of these, reality-changing conversations that I think we need to have more and more of in more and more venues, in more and more ways. We need to interrupt business as usual, which is killing us, killing our species and potentially all other species, especially with the threat of nuclear meltdown following the collapse of civilization. But no one's talking about this. We're not talking about the problem. We're not dealing with it. We're in this mass delusion.
Yeah.
And you and I live in this mass delusion, except for when we, tunnel out of it and meet at this place called reality.
Mm-hmm.
And we deal, we grapple, we talk about it. We make plans for what to do about it. We take action, such as the action of recording this video conference. We are in action right now.
Well, that's a real brave thing to do, because I've done things like that too. All of a sudden in public, try to warn people to wake up and to think, to come out of the mass delusion. And it takes a real individual effort to do that. So I commend you. That's a brave thing to do. You all of a sudden, a person wakes up, they're taking personal responsibility, they're trying to warn other people, and you're lucky. In some places, you would have gotten arrested. If it had been the Soviet Union, and you had gone into Red Square and started going, wake up, we're in a totalitarian society, they come and arrest you. And that's why, at least in the United States, we're not in that kind of police state yet.
Yeah.
And then also, you can be thrown into a mental hospital. You show your individuality like that you are aware of certain things, and then the officials say, okay, you're crazy, and you're making other people crazy. So we're going to come and take you, and we're going to put you into a mental hospital, which might even be worse than a jail. So, that's courage to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Chris.
It's the peaceful warrior. It's the hearing that inner voice within. And I think that is the first stage of people coming out of the darkness of what's around us. The inertia.
Yeah, the first stage is just talking about it openly, being able to have open conversations about it, acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. And I'll acknowledge its existence as opposed to trying to ignore it away.
This is what happened to me in, I guess it was in the 70s, is that I started becoming really aware of the nuclear arms race. This terrible, mutually assured destruction between the USSR and the United States. And I started vocalizing it. To the point, and then having my own personal revolution, like really confronting my parents. Why didn't you do anything about this? How could you possibly bring in children into a world that's on the verge of a nuclear war? I confronted them. They didn't know how to deal with me. And so they said, we can't deal with you. You're supposed to be a Southern lady. I was raised in North Carolina, so, hey, they bring in the police and they say, you are crazy. So then I go into a mental hospital, and I have to be in there for about a month. I had to go in front of a judge to get released from there. And, it was a very eye-opening experience, because I saw how they control people, how they give out drugs to people, and also electric shock, shock them into conformity.
Wow. Wow.
So, this is it's a serious thing to be called crazy by the state. And maybe this is why some people, they're afraid to discuss these ideas. So what we want to inspire people, yes, it's your obligation to talk the truth and to express how you're feeling about these uncertain times that we live in.
Yeah, totally.
But all my life it's been one disaster or another, whether it's the nuclear weapons pointed at you from some hostile other country, or whether it's the country that you're a citizen pointing weapons at another country. I mean, it's just this trauma. Back to the trauma that we're all having to live through. And people have different stages of post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's really not post, it's present stress disorder.
Totally.
So
and then there's the intergenerational trauma of all of us, really, because whether we're colonizers or colonized or descendants of, or of both. There's that intergenerational trauma, intergenerational guilt, etc.
Absolutely. Especially, people like my family, they came over as colonizers from Europe. And, they took the land from the Native American people. The first colonizers that came to North Carolina, one of the 3 original colonies, they brought in the land surveyors. That was like the first thing they did. They're going to survey the land.
Wow. And divvy it up and separate it from nature, and then kick off the First Nation inhabitants, enslave other people, bring them over to work the land in horrid conditions of slavery, and on and on. It's not a pretty picture. So the trauma, it's intergenerational trauma, and it's present. And I'm really glad you brought up trauma, because if we fail to acknowledge that, it's like a trauma victim not getting treatment, not getting any kind of treatment, and if anything, being told, what are you complaining about, right? You're lucky to have what you have, and blah blah blah, and and so as we complained about these things, I remember getting on a radio program when I was in middle school and talking about my fears about nuclear weapons and that and nuclear war, and they basically said, oh, don't worry, nothing's going to happen, nothing bad's going to happen.
Right. And that's what I was told too. You're not supposed to talk about that. Why are you even bringing it up? Nobody else around you is. They're not talking about it in school. Everyone was just in denial. I mean, then it started to change, though. People did start to talk about it. There became some television shows that a lot of people watched about what the effects of a nuclear war might be like, which is very, very horrible. Total dystopia to live through a nuclear nuclear war, nuclear winter. Carl Sagan was talking about that. Dr. Helen Caldicott was talking about the medical effects of a nuclear war. So that changed things. People's awareness was uplifted. And eventually, that Berlin Wall fell down. And, the historical consequences of that, maybe led to this global capitalism that we live in now, which is accelerating the heat engine of civilization.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, the threat of a nuclear annihilation has not gone away. They still have weapons on hair trigger alert. You know, and I think it was Obama who has upgraded the nuclear arsenal. They get rid of some weapons, they make smaller and bigger weapons. You know, so it's all this fear. You know, there's just so much fear, but that is one of the results of trauma.
Yeah, fear. Yeah. And so, you know, I feel like, you know, we're not just dealing with abrupt climate change, we're also dealing with our own trauma in having this conversation, this ongoing conversation with the world. It's kind of like group therapy for humans on planet Earth.
Yeah, I think that's what needs to happen, you know, because as long as we're holding the trauma, it just is that's the feedback loop. That positive feedback loop just loops around. The trauma, you know, we can't go forward because we're so traumatized and we can't see a way out of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, trauma leads to inaction, which leads to more of a feeling of helplessness and being stuck, which in turn is traumatic. The trauma of being incarcerated in a system that you know is killing you. You want to break free of, but you don't believe you can break free of it.
And it's really difficult to break free of it.
That's right.
It's not an easy thing to do because everything has tentacles in this current system of everything, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the educational system, the military system, the whole thing, the civilization.
Yeah, so what comes to mind is, like on the airplane where it says put on your own oxygen mask first before you try to help the person next to you. We've been talking about healing the planet, right? And right now, for the first time, I feel like we're dealing in a serious way with our own trauma.
Yeah.
And that's putting on our own oxygen mask, acknowledging the trauma.
Yeah, I mean, in this house I've been living in, for a long time, I've been traumatized by the dogs. The sound, the noise pollution.
Yeah.
I'm finally now trying to deal with that. And luckily I can, but yeah, I mean, when we start discussing my ideology further, I look at the icon of the single family house and how that is a colonial system. And that is part of the trauma that we have outgrown. However, we're still stuck in it. At least I am. I'm still stuck in that.
Yeah. These houses become prisons, and they're.
Oh, it's so obvious. Like, I've been going house hunting. In Tucson, there are certain neighborhoods, they have bars on the windows. So the only thing that makes it different than a prison is that you have the key to unlock the front door.
Right.
But you're looking out at prison bars, because you're so afraid of whoever's going to come and break into your house. And the other thing that I've noticed on the same level is that street lights. People have these, the city puts in these street lights that just shine into people's front yards. So you never have that comfort of darkness.
Wow. Yeah. It's oppressive.
And here in Arizona, I mean, we're noted for our beautiful skies. You know, we can see the universe here, but we really can't because of all the light pollution now.
Yeah.
So we're losing that. You know, if humans are losing touch with the cosmos, our connection with the universe on a daily basis, I mean, a nightly basis, you know, no wonder we're having all these neuroses.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. My goodness. Dealing with our own trauma. Well, you know, just acknowledging it for me is a relief. Just to acknowledge it, you know, that, you know, what I did on Saturday was, it's partly, it simply just made sense to me, but it was also partly me acting out and working through my own trauma by screaming. Well, not screaming, but certainly yelling about it, and doing so very publicly. I mean, just kind of like working it out with the public, with my community, right?
I think that's a great thing to do. I think London used to have a speaker's corner. I don't know if it does anymore. You know, there have been these cities that have places where people can go and be on the soapbox.
Yeah, you know, that's one thing Seattle needs. That is one thing Seattle needs, and I think it doesn't have. I think every city should have that. That's very, very important. Very important. And so that's something I'd like to raise, actually, with the city of Seattle, with the people. Yeah.
We used to have here in Tucson there's no speaker's corner here. But what they did have, they had this place called Access Tucson. And it was a nice big building with television studios and audio recording booths. Wonderful organization. And it lasted for maybe 20 years. And just last year or so, the city council decided to cut the funding from it. But that was a place of free speech. And the city council didn't want free speech. They didn't want to fund it anymore. And they said, well, you know, the technology, and this is partly true, you know, the technology had changed. Now anybody can record on the internet. You don't need a building anymore to do so. And actually what they did is they just changed the funding and gave it to other people. And now it's more of a private organizations that receive public money. It's not the same kind of thing. But that's how they handled not having a speaker's corner, is they had this Access Tucson, which anybody could get a TV show there.
Yeah, wow.
Because even just, with the cities, I mean, having a speaker's corner is certainly a good thing, but you amplify your voice by being able to broadcast it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we need all of the above. We need the broadcasting, and of course, that's what we're doing here, is we're creating our own TV show, basically, and inviting guests and whatnot. Except guests can now teleport in just with a click of a mouse. I mean, that's part of the power of the technology we were talking about earlier. So but I also believe we need the public space where people can just go and talk, and then that way meet other people. So we have that in-person, that grounded in-person connection. So it's not all mediated through the computer monitor.
Well, I think that's so true. I mean, you talked about, revolution. And revolution is about taking over space. Like what happened with the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring, well, they started talking on the internet. I think it was one woman that challenged the men to go to the square, and they did. That big square in Cairo.
Tahrir Square.
Okay, thank you. And then they, it changed history. But they had to take over that square. It had to be a public space.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, we need this kind of takeover of public space.
Mm-hmm.
And the creation of community and all this dialogue that needs to happen so urgently
Mm-hmm.
because of abrupt climate change. And what are we going to do in the face of it? Are we just going to cruise down the hill over the edge of the cliff and, all looking at our cell phones as we descend to the inevitable crash below? Or are we going to do something about this? Right? I know you and I are on the same page about this, but I'm just saying it rhetorically to the universe. What are we going to do? Let's figure it out. Let's get together and figure it out. And that's what we're doing here. And that's what we're doing on the multiple other channels, on the other series that we'll be publishing on howtochangetheworld.org. So this is just the beginning. And I know your time is limited, Doctor, so I want to respect that. So we can wrap if you'd like, or carry on for a few more. It's up to you. And but in either case, what a beautiful thing we have going on here. And we invite the world. Join the conversation. You can start off just by posting comments in this YouTube video. Comments, questions, whatever you'd like, and we'll also be inviting folks onto the program. So,
yeah, I think the Occupy Wall Street was a beginning of taking back the public space by taking the public parks, and that was something that they ran into the police state, and that's what we're up against. And that's why education is so important, to be able to allow people more information about why you're just killing yourselves by not allowing this revolution to happen.
Yep, exactly. That education is so key, and just for people to see that there is a community that's grappling with this, that they're not alone. They don't have to be alone. And we can do this together. We can do something.
And I was part of Occupy Tucson, where we took over the park. And what happened is we had to deal with the trauma. There were people that came in that were addicts, that were homeless, totally traumatized. If you're homeless, that is such a traumatizing situation. If you're a drug addict, you've got major trauma going on. And we didn't have the social workers and the people to deal with that level of trauma in that movement. And so it just became such it traumatized everybody in the whole Occupy Tucson.
Well, it became a trauma ward. It became a trauma ward with insufficient staff.
Exactly. That's what happened in Tucson.
Wow. But what's interesting is, I don't know to what extent Occupy dealt with the trauma overtly, like what we're talking about today, right? Is dealing with our own trauma. Did Occupy address that?
There was a lot of power plays that were happening in among what they call it, the General Assembly. That was occurring, patriarchal domination. That was trying to be addressed. And then it became, people wanted different identity politics. So that was divisive on certain levels. And there wasn't really, in my opinion, a unifying vision of where we're going to go. And then having to deal with police every day, every night. They would not let people stay overnight at the parks. And if you did stay, because there was a tent city, what they would do is they would give you a ticket, like $100 ticket. Some people had, 40 tickets or something like that. And that, you know, those were the brave people that got tickets every night. There was just a lot. It was so difficult to deal with the trauma that people came with, the power plays that people were doing, the identity politics, and then the police state. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah. And so what a great thing now that we have this safe space on the internet, right? I laugh to myself as I say it, since with the invasion of privacy and whatnot.
Yeah.
But at least we have a space, right, where we can communicate openly and publicly. And so, yeah, we have to judiciously find that balance between the, you know, the online and the real world. But I mean, we don't have time to waste. We've got to stay in action, which is what we're doing right now by holding this public meeting, right, recording it and sharing it with the world. So. And
there was this one, what was his name? I think Gibson. He was a cyberpunk writer, and his prediction was that the revolution, the transformation would happen over the internet. You know, there was that this is really the space of the transformation. Now, I don't know about that. You know, I still think it might have to deal with public space as well. You know, taking over the public arena, the physical space. But certainly using this as an organizing tool.
Absolutely, as well as a collective intelligence.
Yeah.
And, you know, the backbone of the collective intelligence. So beautiful, beautiful. All right. Well, I know you need to get rolling there, so I really thank you for your time and everything that you're contributing to the world. You're just like this fountain of generosity.
Well, thank you so much for organizing this. I really appreciate what you've done too.
Thank you, Dr. Sneutopia. Well, we're just getting started.
Okay.
So onward into the future. Thanks so much. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.